What's up, y'all? This is the Femme Future podcast where we, you, me, and the audience get the opportunity to learn from amazing women curating a better future for themselves and for others. I'm your host, Amber Latrice, and today I am joined by, oh my goodness, what can I say? An amazing businesswoman, an amazing business mentor, just a joy to spend time with and hear from. I am joined by Miss Mia. How are you?
I am well. That was an amazing introduction. Thank you.
It's all true. It's all true. So I kind of gave like some high level descriptors. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I kind of gave some high level descriptors. Can you tell the audience that maybe doesn't know you quite as well yet a little bit about yourself?
I sure can. First of all, hello, everyone. I am Mia. I'm an Iranian British living in Spain. Long story, maybe we'll cover. Officially speaking, I'm a venture builder. What that means is that I help people build new companies. Right now, I'm working with a lot of small and big and medium-sized companies who are doing these really, really interesting work. But previously, I've done that for big funds, for big organizations, for corporations, and also independently. So I did have a company building a lot of different businesses. Unofficially, I am the queen of reinvention. I think that's kind of what I have really been doing with my life, which ties into, I guess, the podcast of really trying new things, designing new bits of life, and hence the journey so far. But we'll get into it, I guess.
Awesome. I love that. The queen of reinvention. We are definitely going to circle back to that. So now that we know a little bit about who you are now, I want to kind of like take a step back and get like a little bit of a baseline. So I want you to think back to when you were 25. Who was Mia at 25?
25. 25. We're talking 2004, thereabout. Okay. I will tell you. So I had just graduated from school. Mm-hmm. I need to go a little bit further back for this answer to kind of have some context.
All right.
So even though I was born in the UK, I actually grew up in Iran. And then at some point, after kind of doing my education there, I eventually ended up coming back to the UK, going to university. So this is 25 is when I had just graduated for the third time at my third attempt at university in the UK.
Wow.
And I think I had just landed my first official job, starting consulting. A really, really exciting time. Do you know, it was one of those moments where suddenly, like from a very unstable, really unclear life, I kind of thought, okay, now I can breathe. Now we are like on the path that's relatively easy. And sometimes it's weird to talk about like a hardcore consulting job as an easy path, but with everything leading up to it, I was like, no, now I can just relax a bit, at least for a few years. So this is what was happening. I was starting my career, I was starting to learn not just about the actual job, but about social interactions. And I can explain later on why that was. So there was just a time of self-discovery, social discovery, really understanding work and how to build a future. So a lot happening during this time and trying to keep everything together.
Wow. Okay, so normally I would jump to like, let's bridge the gap between then and now. But I have a quick question. You said your third time, and I want to ask about that. If you're okay with sharing, I want to ask about that because I think there's a lot of people that may be listening whose background does not necessarily look like what they believe is necessary for them to curate the future that they desire. So what did you mean by like your third time?
Okay. So this is what happened. So when I finished school, I was still living in Tehran. Mm-hmm. And there is this really, really, really tough process to get into university in this country, where every high school graduate on the same day, at the same time, across the country, take part in an exam. And the exam covers 4 years. So you can imagine, it's like this super dramatic half-a-day exam. And based on how well you do on that exam, you will be allocated into a university and a degree. So you can just say, my preference is A, B, C, but depending on how well you do, you might fall into one of those. So you have no idea what you would get
Wow.
into. And if I remember correctly, you can have up to like 100 or something preferences. So it could be that you're doing well, you get to a really good university or a terrible one, but who knows? Anyway, so
Wow.
I had just taken part in this exam when we ended up moving back to the UK. So I managed to get into university, but I had paused it. So I came to the UK, got into university. But what happened was, after maybe 6, 7 months in university, my parents actually arranged for a marriage for me. So I had started university in London.
What?
A marriage had been arranged for me in Iran.
Okay.
So I was studying computer engineering at the time. By summer, that was it. I went back home, got married to some person, to start my official lady life. So this was the first failure. Like, I had to leave that university. The second time, once I
Yeah.
landed back, I was like, hey, I already got accepted here anyway. Can I start there? So I ended up getting into the university. But what happened was, this was a very, very, very tough time of my life. That imagine, like, I was this sweet, naive little girl who knew nothing about anything. I don't like studying.
Yeah.
Suddenly, like, I'm 18, married off, move in with this effectively stranger, admittedly a nice stranger, but moving with this person. And suddenly, because of a bunch of things that, if you think is relevant, we can get into, I also am semi cut off from the family. So suddenly, here is a girl who has no social skills, knows nothing. Like, sorry, I keep going back and forward a bit, but to give some context, because I was brought up in this very traditional family, I wasn't really allowed, for example, to have friends, to listen to music,
wow.
to like, if I was to read a book, somebody would have to read it before to then for me to have permission to read it. So if you think about my social awareness, my cultural awareness, it was simply not there. Academically, I was very bright, right? So I had studied a lot, but I didn't know any of these things. So, and the family generally felt that the reason they had to, like, marry me off to somebody who was from, like, an academic family, but like a normal middle class family, they felt that they were almost pushed into this path because they felt I questioned too much. There was something suspicious, and they did not want to risk kind of holding on to me being part of the family. It's always better to kind of finish the story. So as a result, I was suddenly isolated with no skills, with no backing. And on top of it, my partner at this particular time, my ex-husband, he also finished university and he never really looked for another job. So suddenly we are also having this huge economic challenge, right?
Yeah.
So I started university, but at the same time, we need bills to pay. We need, like, food, money for food, like really, really basic things. So what happens is I start trying to find a job. Now, we're talking quite a long time ago, so it wasn't super easy to find any jobs to, like, a young woman in Tehran. Like, it was just, like, quite a tough time. And generally, the way I used to work, I think it's very different right now. But back in the day, you had to have a connection or you had to know somebody to be able to get a job. So as a result, I ended up finding a few jobs, working and never getting paid. Like, for months on end, I was just working. And they would just tell me, don't worry, next month, end of the month, 2 weeks from now. Eventually got to a point that I was working all the time, not making anything, being really worried. And of course, I have the university stuff as well. So what happened was I started actually with a cousin of mine. She's always had my back. We ended up doing these little posters for different universities. We put them basically on the notice boards that I would do their homework for them. You know, like the university essay, translation, like anything. I literally was spending all day writing, like, essays and things to, like, different people on different universities. And there was
Was
a
this your
particular
first
round.
business venture?
This was not strictly speaking, but at times of desperation, you'll have to come up with some ideas to make some
Yeah.
money, you know. Anyway, so long story short, I ended up kind of spending so much time doing everybody else's homework that I just did not have time for my own. Eventually, I decided to drop out of that university, the university that I went to. And that's roughly around the same time that I also decided that was it. Like I just could not continue. I'm kind of missing a chunk in the middle here. Now, what happened was I started doing a lot of work. In parallel, I also taught myself how to build websites. This is back in 98. Yeah, so back in 98.
That's like legit coding.
Yeah, well, no, back in the day, they were so simple. They were literally like HTML, ML, like really, really basic things, really, really basic things. I literally ended up doing, you could view code on browsers and then basically look at the code and like replicate it. And this is when there was only one ISP in Iran. And I kind of thought, I'm going to just tell people about internet. Like I thought internet was like the thing that we were going to do. So anybody that I met, I told them about like email, what is an email? Like how do you can check things up? Anyway, after a while, I ended up actually doing a website for somebody and I made probably what I had made. If I was to be paid, probably what would have made in like 10 months in one go. And suddenly I realized, hey, this internet thing, this technology thing might be my thing. I don't need capital. I just need to work hard. And if I focus, find my client, job done. And so anyway, I did a few of these jobs and then I had saved a little bit of money. And that was the time that I thought, maybe it's time to come back to the UK and try again for the university. Because again, at this time, all of my schoolmates were graduating from uni and I just felt like terrible. So like, that's it. I'm going to UK, I'm restarting from scratch. Anyway, so all of this coincided with 25 being when I had just graduated, got my first job. But this is how the third time I managed to get it to the end.
Wow. Like even in what you just shared, there were so many nuggets and so many moments about just like, one, doing what you have to, two, even in your youth, it seemed like you remained curious, ask questions. And then even beyond that, it seemed like you felt like the internet was going to be this thing. So you were willing to do what was necessary to be on the forefront of it. So even in going back to what that was and where that came from, that is amazing. I feel like you dropped so many nuggets of wisdom there that can really give us practical examples of what it looks like to continue to push. So you're 25, you're just finishing school, you're out of university. How did you get from there to where you are now? What was that journey like?
Okay, so I started my career from consulting. And the reason I chose consulting was actually because I knew I wanted to have my own business, but I felt that I really knew nothing about the real world because of everything that I explained. So I felt, frankly, how would I even start anything? I don't know anything. So I kind of thought, okay, either I'm going to get into finance or I'm going to get into consulting. I was too late to apply for any finance job. So consulting it was. So I applied for consulting graduate job, got in. And my thinking was, I will do this for 4 or 5 years. I will learn a lot. This will give me the confidence, but also the knowledge to then jump into build my own business. So this was the plan. So during my consulting years, I worked really, really, really hard, like really hard, but never for a promotion, like never because I thought, like that. I did it because I really wanted to maximize my learning. In bracket, I made a mistake that I really optimized for learning and knowledge, whereas I think I should have optimized also for network. Like this is something I missed, right? Like I didn't know network was important. Anyway, we'll come back to that. So, but I worked really, really hard, worked on a lot of different projects, and I did a lot of work for a few years. I worked internationally. So around the world, like living in different countries, working with different really interesting projects, and always having things parallel to each other, just to, again, because I felt this was a time for me to work hard, learn a lot, save money. Like I was quite careful with how I spend money, just to build the foundation so that I can make a jump and I can do my own thing. And eventually, at some point, I actually had this really my final consulting role. I actually really loved it. Like I love my job. I love the boss. Like he was just so supportive. Anyway, and I remember one day I was talking to my father, and he said, "Hey, like, it's so nice, like that you. It seems like you're finally settled. You have a really good job. You are doing the sensible thing. Like enough of this talk about I want to eventually have a business. At least like you have a full-time good job, good career path." And then I kind of realized, hold on, if I don't quit, I will never do, because it's just like I'm loving it. It's amazing. The next day I handed in my resignation. And that was like the time that I thought, if I don't go, I will just not go. I will wake up one day, I'll be like a middle manager, director somewhere, and that would be like this, the end of it. Because I have to say, this particular company, I had a really, really amazing time. And this is roughly, it's a little bit in parallel to when iPhone was launched. Yeah, so iPhone had just been launched like a year before. And again, I thought it felt very similar to the internet days. So in parallel to my job, I started learning how to build apps. Yeah. And of course, other people, including my brother that I mentioned before, also they were really young. So my brother and a bunch of his friends who were 18, they were like, "Hey, this is kind of cool stuff you're doing. We want to learn too." And I'm like, "Sure." So collectively, with a few of us, we started learning how to do this in parallel. And then when I decided to quit my job, I kind of thought, hey, like we have been building these apps for fun for like 6 months. Maybe I can just like do something around this. So this is exactly the opposite of what I advise all of my founders, that Amber, like I tell them, like, you need to think about who's your customer, what is the problem? Don't randomly like pick something. But of course, at the time, I kind of thought, hey, like we know how to build some technology. And of course, I had worked on so many big projects by this point that I thought, we'll make this work. So I quit my job, started the company, the very first company that was basically a studio. So the idea was we would build really interesting apps. And guys, you have to remember that this was when really, really basic things were like super cutting edge. Like people were so excited, but at the same time, big companies really thought mobile was rubbish. Like you still had to really convince customers. By customers, I really mean clients and big companies, to invest in mobile or think this has a future. People were like, we have a website. What is app for? So it was a really interesting time. I literally spent most of my time the first year just explaining to people why mobile will win. Anyway, so we set up the first company. We actually failed after 9 months because me and my co-founder at the time, we did not get on. So that company kind of dissolved. But the same night that we decided that that's it, I set up the second company. I like sent an email to my accountant, set up the next one. So the team moved with me to the new company, but we rebranded. So instead of being a studio, we started being more of an agency. So building apps for clients. And we actually started, who was the first? I think our first clients were really creative. So there were people that I had reached out to say, hey, you can build stuff. You are creative. What about the collaboration? So it was a very random, and they were not commercial propositions. They were really innovation focused. So I really wanted to do things so we can showcase what we can do. So that was the kind of pitch. And what happened was we did, so I'm really going through the details. Tell me if this is still interesting.
No, yeah, for sure.
Yes?
1000%.
Okay.
Give us more.
So we ended up doing some really, really cool stuff. So the projects that we did, some of them, the very first one, I think it was the first one that we did, ended up being written about everywhere. We had tons of PR, and we were like, what is happening now? We ended up getting picked for the Museum of Modern Art in New York. So a lot of really interesting things happened. And again, this was not a commercial project. It was kind of like a really, really nice collaborative project. But off the back of this, then a lot of people started to call us to say, hey, we've seen this thing in whatever magazine, or we've seen this award. Why don't we meet and do something? And we ended up building a lot of partnerships. So either people who were complementary to us, imagine like design houses, people who would do UI, UX, people who were complementary to us as a tech company, we would collaborate. Or we had a really nice partnership with a competitor, with a very big competitor, that they just did not have time for a lot of the requests that were coming their way. And I was like, can I have your scraps, please? And they were like, sure, you can have them. But it was just super nice. And honestly, I can't even remember how this came about, but it was all about collaboration. So I basically built tons of little partnerships across the board. And as time went by, a lot of the people that we did something with as a client, we ended up doing something together with as a partnership. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And some of our clients eventually became our almost partners for joint ventures. So we went from like, let me do a tiny project for you. Now, can we do something that we will do together roughly, to, okay, let's build a business together. So this is where the venture building started. So we did a lot of these type of projects. And this is also the time that we learned a lot of things around building products, because originally, from my, I guess, technical background, and also my team who are all engineers, we had the thought that, well, a product will be technically really nice, it will be really beautiful, people will want it. Like we thought, good idea, good tech, there you go, good business.
Yeah, makes sense.
Later we realized it makes sense. But then if you think about it, in reality, and you've heard this before from me, that the customers don't care about a good product. They care about a problem that needs solving. Do you know?
Very true. Yes.
You know, so we ended up building many, many things. I think during those 4 or 5 years, we built maybe 30, 40 products.
Oh, wow.
Some of them, I was sure, Amber, like I had such a strong belief that this would be the winner. No, crickets. And equally, we had products that I was like, oh, we're just learning something, and suddenly it would become super popular in some random market. So we did a lot of experimentation to just figure out these basic things of like, think about your customer first, then what is the problem, and then things will fall into place. But through those and a lot of collaborations, we ended up building a bunch of different businesses. Many of them failed after like a few years. A few of them are still going. A couple of them we ended up selling. So I exited a few of those. But anyway, a really, really exciting time of this trial and errors. And then I guess the summary of that trial and error is what I have taken to other companies to kind of not make the mistakes that we made, because we actually did a lot of like slightly random stuff. But from that point, I went back to the corporate world, but with a slightly different take, mixing consulting and I guess a lot of stuff I had done. And I set up a new department at one of the big four called, what did we end up calling it? Digital and Emerging Technologies. So I really focused on social at the time. The way that we were defining emerging tech was technology that's here, but it has not been mainstream yet. Yeah, so at the time, this is going back almost 10 years ago. Yes, almost 10 years ago. Wow, almost 10 years ago. This would have been social media, analytics, cloud, and mobile. Yeah, so like now it sounds like so basic, but at the time they were not mainstream. So I went back to set up this department focusing on these four, plus AI, wearable, that was a thing back then, now that we don't talk about it, and cryptocurrencies. So these were all very new, like almost 10 years ago.
Yeah. Oh,
so really focused on this. And then I focused effectively what they were calling disruption. So what are technologies that will really, really, really change industries and societies as a result of it. Long story short, I went back, did that for a few years, and then sort of really focusing on building relationships between big corporations, universities, startups, like how can we link these together? How can we actually bring new technologies in and commission work and do something that's really interesting ahead of time, instead of like waiting for us to be disrupted, maybe we can be a little bit more proactive and think about what is the outcome we're looking for? Can we actually enable that and do it in a much more proactive way? And then following that, it's just been the funds and kind of doing a lot of venture building. But I also had a funny period in the middle after this, which is when I felt I have had enough of, let's say, purely commercial work, corporations. Maybe we can focus on impact. So I also spent almost a year just focusing on impact stuff, and then getting a little bit disillusioned, which is a little bit sad to say, but taking a step back. And I think this is the moment where also COVID hit, and I felt, okay, maybe it's time for, again, another redesign. This is when we decided to come to Spain and really design a much more simple, self-contained life where I don't have dependencies on a job or something that's external. So we're actually quite independent here, and doing a lot of very traditional kind of placemaking type investments here in the place that we are. Yeah, so having that, so having this, I guess, independence from having to have a career path or having to have a promotion or a job or something that I need to be on this leash in a way, independent from that, while having kind of lifestyle that we're happy with, but also being able to work with interesting people and spend time on projects that are either really interesting commercially or impact-wise they're really interesting, or I simply want to support the founders. So there are a couple of companies that I work with, frankly, just because I really want to support the founders be successful more than anything else, right? Yeah, so that's kind of brings us to this particular moment in time. That was a long story.
Wow. It was amazing though. You covered so many, and please forgive me. You might see me look down, but that's because those that know me know I am a serious note taker. But like the things that stood out to me, one, you said, if I don't quit, I will never do. If I don't go now, I will never go at all. Like what? Oh my goodness. That is so profound in and of itself. And then the other thing that just really stood out to me, like I said, there were many things, but this concept that you were completely fine doing whatever it was that you felt you needed to do in parallel.
Oh yeah.
Like, so I feel like a lot of times we feel like, oh no, it has to be like all or nothing. We have to quit the job and go into the entrepreneurship, or we have to do like some of these things that like just completely shut the door someplace else. But you found space to do everything in parallel. And then those partnerships that you had made, like those clients became partners who became like
absolutely
partners in the
honestly, I really honestly think if I've had any success, it has been my huge luck in finding really good partners and people who work with me. Like, honestly, I sometimes blow my own mind of how amazing my team has been. Seriously, like, the very first person I hired is still running the company, and it's been like almost 15 years. Do you know? Wow. And it's still going. And he actually married somebody inside the company. Do you know? And amazing. It's just really nice. Like I feel, and when I look back of everybody who was part of that company, they are so hugely successful now, all of them in their own way, and they've gone such unpredictable paths. In fact, a few days ago, I was talking to one of them. He's doing like his postdoc in genetics and AI, in New York, and
wow,
we were just talking about like the good old days where we would all like sleep in this tiny office that we had, and would try to like make a little app or whatever. It's really wonderful. Like you cannot do anything without a collaboration of other people. It's just the easiest way to move forward, I feel.
That's amazing.
Even though hard work is important too, but it's really hard if you're just depending on yourself.
Wow. So that just like speaks to the importance of community in such
a
beautiful way.
For sure.
Okay. So you've taken us from the 25-year-old self to yourself now. One of my last questions for the interview is, if you could have a conversation with your 100-year-old self, Like, so she's lived this beautiful life. What do you hope she will share about that beautiful life that you've lived?
We were briefly talking about this before the podcast that
We were.
there is this concept that living the question. I don't know if you've ever come across it. The idea is that sometimes we have questions where it's just really frustrating if you're trying to find an answer for it. They're just really hard. So instead of looking for the question, the answer, you want to just live with the question, like have the question there in the back of your mind all the time. And the theory is eventually the answer will reveal itself. To tell you the truth, no answer has been really revealed to me in a sort of a dramatic kind of, divine way. But I feel, I think it's very clear for me what my core values are right now, and what is it that I'm not prepared to compromise on. And I think once you know those, for me, now that I kind of have clarity on those, I feel, frankly, if I have ticked those things, that I have not betrayed them, and if I have not corrupted my soul, and that sounds a bit too serious, but if I have managed to stay true, if I rephrase it, if I manage to stay true to those values, frankly, I'll be happy. I don't think I have, how some people really need to have some sort of big legacy, or they want to leave something behind. I don't have that. Like I don't need people to remember me or know me. As long as I haven't hurt anyone, there is some benefit that goes, I'm happy. Like I don't need the credit for it. But especially right now, because of everything that's happening in Iran, of course, a lot of these things are on my mind, right? On how do we build community? How do we look after each other? How do we collectively move forward? So if anything, by the time I'm 100, I want to be able to look back and see my people be free and happy, on a better path, right? So right now I feel, if anything, I kind of want to make sure, okay, I'm having a good life. I have my tick boxes. I'm staying true to my values, but also I have contributed to a better, happier, more prosperous mini community that I'm living in right now, but also same thing for people back home. If I had seen these, I think it would be a very well worth life, and I would be super happy.
Absolutely.
I think that's I think the preoccupation that I have at the moment.
Awesome. And even though you might not be explicitly building for the legacy, you're definitely leaving an amazing one. So that is awesome. Thank you so much for being like just a part of this podcast, for sharing your story, for like sharing your journey, imparting nuggets of wisdom, allowing people to learn from your experience. If you had any final advice for myself or any of our listeners, what advice would you give us?
Two things. One, and this is going to sound so cliche, but really, really, really trust your intuition. I feel we are told repeatedly to think logically, or like look at some external role model, but I think a lot of those external role models in reality are constructed, and they're not constructed for our benefit. So listen to our own intuition on what we think is the right, wrong thing, or what direction our lives need to have. And frankly, it's one life. We might as well do the thing that's right for us in this one chance that we have. So that's one. The second, I kind of mentioned it because it's a big regret of mine. Network is really, really, really important for us to get to know people who are very similar to us. So that very close, a community where you have that real connection, but also a diverse community, so we can open our minds. So you kind of need that close knit for love. You need a wider one so we can grow. The combination of the two. One is not enough, and maintaining it. I think that's so important.
Oh man, such amazing advice. I can't thank you enough for everything that you've shared on the podcast. So for those that want to connect with you after hearing your amazing journey, your amazing story, can you tell people where they can find you or how they can get connected to you?
Sure. You can easily find me on LinkedIn. You can just search for my name, you'll find me. I'm also on Twitter, which is at Mia Otsoa. Maybe I will write it also.
It'll pop up.
Hopefully. Also, be pre-warned. And normally I talk a lot about entrepreneurship. These days, I'm sharing a lot of stuff about Iran. So my feed is very Iran-centric right now. But typically, it would be mostly around entrepreneurship and kind of building business, especially if you are keen to build sustainable businesses and figuring out how you can have an independent life. That would be a place to go and find my stuff. But maybe not right now. But do follow. Eventually, I'll come back to it.
Yes. Amazing. Thank you again for being a part and being on. And thank you all to the audience for tuning in. Until next time, let's continue to engage, support, and encourage each other as we curate a femme future.